In programming, the value of a variable may change from time to time during the execution of the program. But there are times when we do not want a specific value to change. In that case, we use a constant. A constant represents a value that will never change throughout the execution of the program. In PHP, to create a constant, there's a function called define, which accepts actually 3 parameters. Number 1 is the name of the constant. Number 2 is the value. And then number 3 is a boolean to determine if the constant is case sensitive or case insensitive. The third one is actually optional. So we're going to create our first constant. I'm going to call this pi. And then the next is the value, 3.14. And then the third one, which is optional, we can leave it as a default. Default is going to be false, which means that this constant is case sensitive. So to access the value stored in the constant, I need to refer to it the way it is being defined, pi in all caps. Okay, so if we come down here and say echo pi, and then we do a refresh on the browser, you can see pi is 3.14. So if we change this to lowercase p, then try to do a refresh, use of undefined constant pi. So because this is case sensitive, but if I come here and put true, which means that this constant is no longer case sensitive. So if we do a refresh now, we should still be able to access the value stored in that constant. The name of a constant can start with an underscore or a letter. So like we learned when we talked about variable, the same thing is true here. We cannot start with a number, and usually the convention is to use all uppercase. And if there are 2 words, like in the case of version number, whatever application we build, the version number is always going to be the same until there's a new version. That's when we need to change that. So say the value is v1.2 or the name of the application. So in this case where we have 2 words, we can use an underscore to separate the words. Alright, so if I take this and then just echo version number, should give us v1.2. Alright, and then we can also use all lowercase or a mix of cases because we are using the third argument here, which is true. But if we remove this, we must stick with the way it is being defined here. It becomes case sensitive. By default, when we declare a constant in PHP, it has a global scope, which means even if we want to use this constant within a function, we do not need to prefix it with the global keyword, or we do not need to search for it in the PHP globals array. So let's illustrate this with an example. I'm just going to take this out and say function test constant scope. And then inside the function, we just echo version. And then let's refresh. Nothing is showing up here because we defined the function, but we did not call the function. So say test constant scope. And then we do a refresh, we should see v1.2. Lastly, any attempt to change the value of a constant during program execution will result in an error. So let's quickly consider the example here. I'll come here and say, first of all, show you this way, which is quite awkward. Constant equals to v1.3. Right, there's already an error here. This is not a valid operation actually, so pass syntax error. We cannot actually do this. If we come and say define, remember initially we use the define function when we want to create a constant. So we say define, use the exact same thing, version, just that this time we're going to give a different value. Okay, so PHP is going to detect this and tell us that we have already defined a constant with the same name. So constant version number already defined, and then you see it still returns the old value. It doesn't allow me in any way to change the value that has been assigned to this constant initially. So whatever I did here is actually being ignored. That's why the notice error is being shown here, that the constant is already being defined. Alright, next we'll be looking at how to manipulate strings in PHP using some inbuilt functions.